Hey everybody, well it's Tuesday Truth Time and the people have spoken. You guys all said, well at least most of you said that you wanted to do Psalms, so that's what we're going to jump into. Psalm 1 and 2 are actually the gateway to the Psalms. They lay out a lot of the themes that are interwoven throughout each of the chapters. You can almost think of the whole Psalter as one big book, even though each one is made up of very different sounding songs, hymns, and spiritual songs and prayers. All right, so Psalm 1. We start with this word blessed. Blessed is the man. And this is what this psalm's all about, this idea of blessedness. And if you look at the Psalms, this is going to come up again and again. When we see that word blessed, we tend to think of like super spirituality. But it's actually oftentimes rendered as happy. It's not just a happiness that comes about because your life is going great, you're going to prom or something like that. This is a happiness that comes from a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. It's like when you really respect somebody and maybe you're going through a hard time and they reach down and they give you a big hug and there's a warmth and a happiness that fills you because of that relationship that you have. That's the kind of happy blessedness that's being described here. So here we see that it goes on to say that this blessed man does not do a series of things. He does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand in the way of the sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers. He's not spending time in the ways of sinners. And you can even see there with walk, stand, sits, there's an increasing permanence, right, being described there. In contrast, in verse 2, he says, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. That law would be the Israelites' Bible. And he's not just reading it, he is filled with joy and affection for this word because it shows him who God is. And he's not just reading it, he's meditating on it. That means he's chewing on the truth of God. He's kind of turning truth in every facet so that he can see the beauty of who God is. Then the psalmist goes on to talk about how he looks. What is the result of this in his life? And he uses a simile here. He is like a tree. And we would typically not speak this way, but he's speaking poetically. He's a tree that's planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in its season and its leaf does not wither. And the image there is that even when there's no rain, if a tree is by a river, it has a constant source of life in the waters that rush by. And even the Nile would always have vegetation around it, even when Israel was experiencing a famine. And that's the promise for those who delight in the law and meditate on his law. They will constantly abound. Then we see the contrasted description of the result of the wicked's way. They are not so. They are not planted. They are not firm. They are not standing firm in the midst of storms and famines. They are driven by winds like chaff. That would be like the dust that would fall out when wheat was threshed on the ground to kind of help get the grain out of it. The dust would just float away as winds came. That's how unstable the wicked way is. Rather than being planted, they are driven by the wind. And then we see this word therefore. It's always good to remember that that's kind of like bringing it all together. What does this mean? Well, that means that when it comes to the end of their days, in the judgment, wicked will not stand. They will not sit in the congregation of the righteous in eternity. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous. He does not know the way of the wicked. He does not stand with the wicked. He does not sit with the wicked. And the way of the wicked will perish. Now, one more thing to bring out about the structure of this psalm. You may have noticed it if you've been paying attention closely, but there's a lot of parallelism, a lot of mirroring in this psalm. Overall, in the whole structure of the psalm, we started with blessing and we ended with perishing. Then we went to a description of the wicked, walking, sitting, and standing. And at the end of the psalm, towards the end of it, there's a standing and a sitting in the way of the way of the wicked and of the Lord there. And then in verse 2, we see a description of the person that is blessed. And in verse 4, there's a description of the person who's wicked. And then finally, in the middle of all this, we see this promise. In all that he does, he prospers. This is a way that Hebrew writers often wrote, where they would mirror things all the way down to the middle so that the central part of the psalm is the big takeaway point. And so the main point here is that If you delight in the law of God, delight in God himself through his word, you will experience a blessed happiness and prosperity in all types of seasons of life. Now, that does not mean that you're going to be rich, or that you're going to have a great girlfriend or boyfriend, or that relationship's going to pan out, or that your parents are going to be just super chill with everything you want to do. What it does mean, though, is that no matter what happens in life, no matter what trials or struggles or suffering inevitably comes into your life, you will abound with joy, because God himself will be with you, standing and sitting and knowing your ways. And even when the judgment comes and the wrath that you deserve hangs over your head, you will not experience it, because Jesus Christ will take that in your place. Ultimately, the blessed man in Psalm 1 is actually Jesus. He was the one who delighted in the word of God unlike anyone else. And he is the one who, in his work on the cross, planted all who trust in him deep down in his living water, so that we will not be driven and tossed by like the chaff, and will not be judged in the judgment. All right, next time we'll talk in Psalm 2, and we'll see you then.